Hi everyone, my name is Jenny Yonst and I'm going to be taking you through your course EDUC3000 Holistic Health. So welcome to lecture 1. And before we start, let's do an acknowledgement of country. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Whadjuk people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I respect their cultural beliefs and the spiritual relationship with their country and recognise that these are still important to the Whadjuk people today. So let's look at our course outcomes and expectations. So when we look at this course, this is a prerequisite for prac. So you are going next year into a childcare centre to do one of your placements. So this is why this course is so important. So you're looking at how you plan evidence-based care and educative routines for young children that lay a solid foundation for ongoing healthy lifestyle. We want you to then be able to apply an integrated approach to the health, hygiene, nutrition and safety factors facing young children and families and investigate some evidence-based early intervention. We want you to be able to demonstrate an understanding of the principles of health and safety routines and environments and the importance of a team-based approach in early childhood. We want you to be able to identify ways to respectfully communicate and collaborate with children, families, colleagues and other professionals regarding children's health, safety and well-being. And finally, to reflect on the implications of child health and safety issues in early childhood settings with regard to the way in which holistic approaches are impacted by professional standards, practices and policies. So our course assessment structure. We have 3 assessments. Your first assessment, we have a series of multiple choice quizzes. Each of those is worth 5 marks and that totals up 30% over the 6 quizzes that we have. Your second assessment is building a website which will look at a particular content around care routines, and we will go into a lot of depth about that over the next few weeks. Your third assessment is 3 different questions. They're not really questions though, and you've got to give some written responses to those, and that's due near the end of semester. So those 3 assessments we will go through in a lot more detail as we progress. In order to do your multiple choice quizzes, you'll need to make sure you have access to the textbook. So please ensure that you can find and access that in physical or digital form, and that you keep up with all the readings that are identified on your course outline. So let's move into some of the content that we are going through. So first of all, what do we think when we think about the word health? So some people immediately think about our physical health. Some people, depending on their life circumstances, might think about their mental health. What we're wanting to do is we want to think about it from that holistic point of view of how everything fits together, so that we are thinking not just about physical health or potentially mental health and so on, but we're thinking about what we can do to impact on our personal ideas together with the children that we work with. So when we look at what is holistic health, so what we want to think about is that it's much broader than what's existed in the past. So when people talked about health, they generally used to talk about just physical health. How were you feeling? And it was only about whether your body was doing what it needed to do. So what we know now is that health is a state of physical, social, economic, emotional, spiritual, cultural well-being. So all of that contributes to our holistic health. Now, it's determined by genetic and environmental factors. You might hear people talk about nature versus nurture. So when we think about nature versus nurture, our genetics might have us predetermined for certain things, but our nurture being the environment that we grew up in together with the way that we structured our physical environment, that is how we can then either succumb to those potentials of our nature, or we can prevent it. So we want to be focused on that idea of preventative health. So we want children and adults to be able to make good choices and engage in behaviour that will improve the quality of life and really lessen those risks, those potential for risks as well. So what are some of the factors that we know dramatically or slightly influence children's health? So the first one is the hereditary or predisposition to certain health problems. So some of those we can mitigate and some of them we can't. So if a child is born with cerebral palsy, we can help with OT and help with speech therapy and help with certain things, but we can't stop the cerebral palsy. They're born with it. So that's what we mean by what they have inherited versus what we can mitigate and change and help and minimize and so on. So environmental factors are things like making sure that caregivers understand what a healthy diet is. Not saying that all food is bad or all food is good or everything in moderate, whichever way we phrase it, but we understand what will contribute to a healthy body for them. Making sure that we are participating in appropriate physical activities. So we know that we need to get up and moving and that sitting down all day every day is not a good thing for us. We know that getting adequate rest. So sleep is when your brain develops. So that's why little babies sleep a lot more than adults do. And so making sure that we understand why and how we sleep and that we understand about sleep cycles, they are the things that will help us to help parents create the best environment for their children. We know that some of the environmental factors are having access to dental and medical care, and that's becoming more and more apparent now as our costs of dental and medical care keep increasing. We used to have a lot of Medicare funded doctors. I'm now finding that they are decreasing in every suburb and that is impacting on general medical care for young children and adults as well. Reducing stress, so helping the adults to understand how they can reduce their own stress and not put that on the children, and reducing stress for the children, not making the world completely stress-free because that won't build any resilience, but reducing the stress. Making sure that we understand what is a safe and clean environment and making sure that we help caregivers to understand that as well. And developing and participating in stable and respectful relationships. So we're creating that between colleagues, within the way that we interact with the children and so on. So all of those environmental factors together with the hereditary or predisposition, they all influence children's health. So we need to make sure that we are doing the best we can for them. So how is this idea of health, safety and nutrition all interrelated? Because that's what really underpins a lot of this course. So first of all, we know that if we want children to grow and develop in the best way possible, that we need to have adequate health, safety and nutrition that is available for them and provided to them. So growth is about, yes, of course, their physical changes, but it's things like the effective eruption of their teeth. They're growing taller, absolutely. Putting on the appropriate amount of weight, having vision that matures as a child gets older, having hearing that continues to grow as a child gets older, and so on. So growth involves that interaction of genetic potential that we have together with environmental factors. And environmental factors can severely impact on growth in a positive and or in a negative way. So what does our term development mean? Development describes those changes that are occurring in our physical, cognitive, social, emotional, motor and language abilities. So we want to impact on growth, development and of course wellness. So each component, absolutely important by itself, but when we look at holistic health, safety, and nutrition are all interrelated and collectively something we must consider. So each component impacts on the state and the quality of the other component. So we can't provide a nice, safe environment if we're not looking at children's health and we're not providing good nutrition. So we can't provide good nutrition if we've then got an environment that's very unsafe in some way. So we need to make sure all three in different types of environments and different types of play, and that we are providing the right circumstances for them to do that in the right environment. So we're providing the right limits and rules, but we're making sure that we are not removing all of those limits and rules. And we still want to allow children to be children and have lots and lots of fun, but we want to make sure it's done within an environment that reduces the risk of injury. When it comes to nutrition, so what we know is food provides our nutrients. Yes, nutrients allow us to grow, give us energy, protect us from illness, disease, and are part of our need for ongoing tissue repair. Energy provides what we need for our growth and development. Now, we do have, even in Australia, we have a lot of families that go through what's termed food insecurity, meaning that they don't know where their next meal is coming from, or they've got enough food for 2 more days, but they actually don't know how they're going to provide food for the following days. And we know that some unhealthy dietary practices, they will lead to malnutrition or obesity. So depending on if they are restricting food or whether they're eating too much of food that is not providing all of their sustenance in the right way. That children's learning and behavior, they're also affected by the quality of their diet. So children who are fed a well-balanced diet, they will be able to cope with all of the physical requirements of schooling or care. They'll be able to tolerate their sleep, and they won't go to bed hungry and therefore wake up a couple of hours later because their tummy's rumbling and so on. So poorly nourished children, they're likely to be a bit quieter and withdrawn. They potentially could be disruptive or hyperactive, and they could be more prone to accidental injury because they don't have all the right fuel running through their body. So we need to make sure that we're providing lots of information about nutrition, and if we're in a care environment, that we're providing the right nutrition for things as well. So when it comes to children's mental health, what we know is that early childhood mental health, it's defined as their ability to experience, to regulate and express their emotions. It will then help them to form close and secure interpersonal relationships and to be able to explore their environment. It really influences their self-concept and self-esteem. It looks at how they manage their stress, how they communicate, and how they make effective decisions. Now, mental health is about having a healthy mind and a healthy body, and it influences how we feel about ourselves, what we do, how we think, and how we relate to others. So good mental health helps us to form nice, positive relationships with others and kind of be able to handle life's ups and downs and generally enjoy life a little bit more. So when we have good mental health, what we know is children can feel good about themselves and they're more open to learning and trying and giving a go for new things. So healthy physical and mental development, it's really dependent on lots of exposure to different opportunities. It's where we can help them to understand how to take part in conversations, things like responding to music and movement, building relationships with lots of other people, and exploring the world with all their senses. So a child's mental health affects everything about them. So we have to be really aware of what we're doing and how we provide the best environment to harness that. So early childhood education is where we put together all of those things. It's where we look at the health, the safety, and the nutrition behaviors, and it's where they become really, really well established. It's why we talk with people who have little children about how you need to expose them to lots of different foods, because otherwise it is so easy for children to fall into very fixed food habits, why we need to give them lots of opportunities for playing outside, letting them experiment with touching and feeling all of our natural environment and so on. It can no longer be assumed that all of the safety, nutrition, and health needs are being met at home, because we've got more and more children who are in childcare, and we've got families who need to work. We're hearing so much about our income levels at the moment, and we need to make sure that we are catering for all of that with what we provide in our environments. So where do we find out information about the children and about their health? So we're going to talk a lot more in the next couple of weeks about daily health checks and daily observations, so what you're looking for in the children. We're going to talk about how you can access children's health records and what they will show you. Want you to think about how and when you might have health or developmental screenings. Some things can happen in kindy, some things happen with your community nurse. There's a variety of different developmental screenings that can happen that can support educators as well. And of course, you talk to the family and find out what is going on. But that requires you to develop some really good positive relationships. So when we're thinking about what we want to be able to do and what we understand we can do with children's health, we want to be able to assess and monitor that over a period of time. We want to be able to identify any of the developmental issues that we potentially are encountering where we're like, ooh, I wasn't expecting that from there. Therefore, we can start to work out what are some good intervention plans. We can involve other providers like speech therapists, OTs, developmental psychologists, and so on. And then we can evaluate the child's progress against standards, against expectations, but also against the intervention that we're actively working with. So we can make sure that we are really providing some nice, effective support for everyone in different ways. So what are our things that we are doing? So quality early childhood programs, they use a variety of techniques, including daily health checks, to continually monitor children's health and identify their health needs. So that's taken from your text. So when we think about what's going on, we want to understand the impact of a child's physical health and their development. So oftentimes a child will be on a progression of certain level of development, and then there will be a sickness that will happen, and then it will revert back their physical development. So you may have a child who's just starting to walk, and then they get a really bad flu and they're laid up in bed for a little while and they're just a bit lethargic for a few days, and then they have taken a regression in their physical development. So they're feeling a bit funny about trying to walk. So it takes them another few weeks to get back to where they were before they got sick. So we always need to be aware of the impact on health on their development. Now, what are the documents that we use in our early years? So we've got two main sets of documents that guide, well, not just documents, but they're actual accrediting bodies that guide what we do. So the first one is ASEQA. So this is our national quality standards. So this ASEQA stands for Australian Children's Education and Care Quality Authority. We love acronyms in education. And what ASEQA has as their quality standards is 7 quality areas, and this is what every childcare centre is appraised against, and you will hear the words like exceeding, meet standard, and so on. So these 7 quality areas, we're going to be going through a number of these in this course. We're particularly focusing on quality area 2 for the next few weeks, where we're looking at children's health and safety. So the two posters are directly from their website. The poster on the left is for the childcare setting, and the poster on the right is for the out of school care settings, which is your OSH centres and after school and before school care and so on. So looking at how we make sure that we are catering for all of the children's health and safety. So if we go into quality area 2 and have a look at each of the elements, there is our standard, and we have a standard 2.1, which is each child's health and physical activity is supported and promoted, and then it's broken down into 3 further substandards. So we have well-being and comfort, health practices and procedures, and healthy lifestyle. So with that, we're going to spend some tutorial time on each of those elements over the next few weeks. In standard 2.2, it looks at the safety part of it. So quality area 2 is children's health and safety. First part, health. Second part, safety. And safety is making sure that each child is protected. Now, our 3 elements under standard 2.2 are, first of all, supervision. So this is where you have your ratios of adults with certain levels of qualifications to each of the children, depending on the age of the children and the setting that you're in as well. So with supervision at all times, we will provide adequate supervision and ensure that they are protected from harm and hazard. So it means that, again, we can't prevent an accident, but we can make sure that we are putting in place everything that could potentially cause an accident. In our next element, we're looking at incident and emergency management. So we have planned how we will manage any incident. So for example, if you have a child that requires an EpiPen to be administered, every single person who is an adult working with that child should know how to administer that EpiPen. If we have a child with asthma, we need to have an asthma management plan. If we have a child who has an allergy but it's not requiring an EpiPen, we know what to recognize in the allergy and how we deal with it, and so on. Our third element is child protection, and this is where we identify what is our role if we witness a child being at risk of abuse or neglect. Not just what is our role, but what are our roles and responsibilities to identify and respond. So we can't ignore when we see a child who is at risk of abuse or neglect. We have a role and responsibility to identify and respond. Not to identify and go, oh, poor little sweetie, but to actually respond to it. As much as it might hurt us or it might be something that we're seen as interfering, we have an obligation to identify and respond. So they're the 2 areas that we're looking at for the next few weeks in particular. And then there's another couple of ones that we're looking at a little bit more as we go through. In our AITSL standards, so our AITSL standards are different to a CEQA. AITSL standards fit into our schooling. So these are for teachers. So AITSL stands for Australian Institute for Teaching and School Leadership, AITSL. So with our AITSL standards, there are 7 standards under 3 categories. Our first category is about our professional knowledge. Our second category is about our professional practice, and our third category is about our professional engagement. Now, during your placement where you went out for your 10 days, or you are going to be going out on your 10 days, depending on how things have worked in your placements, you will be looking at each of those standards and observing them, and you are going to be potentially looking at your CEQA things as well and observing those. So your professional knowledge is about know students and how they learn and know the content and how to teach it. Your professional practice is about how you plan your lessons, how you create your environments, and how you provide assessment. Your professional engagement is about how you engage in professional learning for yourself and with others. And then the last one is how you engage professionally with colleagues, parents, caregivers, and community. And that is your professionalism, full stop. So we are looking looking mainly at know students and how they learn over the next few weeks. So we're looking at the physical, social, and intellectual development and characteristics. We're looking at understanding how they learn. We're probably looking at some strategies to support full participation of students with disabilities and so on. So in a childcare setting, you've got less emphasis on your AITSL, but you have more emphasis in a school-based setting. So finally, our ideas that we have covered in this lecture: preventative healthcare, it's relatively new, but we know it's far more cost effective to do preventative healthcare rather than having to deal with the issues. We've got the idea that health is determined by your genetic makeup combined with your environment. So it's not a case of nature versus nurture, it's a case of nature and nurture. Our children's growth and development potentials, they're influenced by health, safety, and nutrition. We need to have all of those working well to create the optimal environment for our children. The idea that mental health is important in early childhood is so crucial in our world. It lays the foundation for positive mental health and well-being now and for the future. And a CEQA, the quality areas that are within that framework, they frame what and why things happen in childcare and the early years in Australia. Final quote for our day: "The body of a child will not grow if it is not fed. The mind will not flourish unless it is stimulated and guided, and the spirit will suffer if it is not nurtured." So this is the very idea of holistic health. It is the whole child, not just cognitive development, not just physical development, and so on. So in our tutorials this week, we have your assessments and course expectations. We'll run through those in more detail. We're doing a little self-assessment of your own health and what you take time out for and so on. We're looking at, I can see a spelling error, sorry. We're looking at quality area 2 with our children's health and safety. We're having a discussion about our beliefs and the idea of nature versus nurture and so on. So it will be wonderful to meet all of you fabulous people during our tutorials this week. I will see you all later on. Make sure that you watch this and each of the subsequent lectures, and there are some readings and things like that that you need to do prior to tutorial. I'm looking forward to seeing you all then. Thanks very much.